Hey guys, John Zombro here, and thanks for joining me in this video. It's one that I've been wanting to make for a long time, and it's the story of my retro hardtail one-bike conversion. And in putting this together, I should mention that the Lifetime Athlete is not a channel dedicated solely to cycling or bike mechanicking. It's instead a platform focused on health, fitness, longevity, and performance. And so I'm going to speak from the perspective of cycling as a lifetime sport and as a physical therapist looking at ergonomics and bike fit and ways that we can maximize our enjoyment in riding, hopefully for a lifetime. This all started about 2 years ago when I embarked upon a downsizing and relocation project. And in doing that, I needed to have just one bike for a while, and I wanted to set this bike up so that it best fit or represented the type of riding that I currently do. 7 or 8 months of the year, I'll grab this bike almost every day and head out for 30 to 90 minutes. I have a few city streets, a short section of paved bike path, and then I have access to a number of miles of gravel road and relatively non-technical or mellow single and double track trails. And so this is an ATB or all-terrain bike. I guess you could also say it's a coffee shop cruiser, a bike path demon, fitness, hybrid, gravel-esque rig, yes to all. The total cost for this project was $267, or I should say only $267. That's due in part to me having a number of spare parts, but also access to the amazing discounts and closeouts and sales that we have on budget bike componentry these days. And so all that went into the build. My thinking was that I wanted to move this bike away from how it was set up in the day as a cross-country race rig and then make it more of a efficient and comfortable ride for me as a person in his early 60s. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through each area of the bike, each part and component, and talk about what I did and why, and hopefully you'll find that there are a few bits of useful information in our discussion. The handlebar is a Ritchie Buzzard bar, and I got this one because it's got some rise and sweep to bring me up and back in my riding position, and it's really comfortable for my shoulders and neck. These come fairly wide, over 800 millimeters, and so I cut about 1.5 inches off each side to get that just right fit, which I like to be just slightly wider than shoulder width when my hands are there. And this gives me the ability to either be slightly extended with my arms and out on this part of my hands and ride almost entirely upright, or I can flex into it and have a little bit of a crouch or a tack position when I want to apply a little more power to the pedals. This is by no means aerodynamic. It's more like a human sail, but nonetheless, it's a great position that this bar allows me to do, and there are other options for sure. I ended up pairing this with a Ritchie stem for no reason other than this particular stem had the very short reach and a rise built into it to complement that position or setup that I was looking for. Trickling out onto the bars, I went with an inexpensive foam grip, and I've used the ergonomics types of grips. I've used Kraton rubber. They're all great, but for a lot of the time in the summer, I'm just jumping on this bike without having cycling gloves, so the foam grips feel great on the bare hand, even though they don't last forever. They're a great bargain. That's what I went with there. Of course, I had a bell in my kit that I put on, and bells are handy lots of places, but particularly on a bike path, it's great to be courteous to the other trail users and let them know that you're coming. This is kind of the handlebar setup. Now, on the stack height, I ended up needing to use this extender, and I had that part, so I didn't need to go out and purchase it. It was from some previous projects. And the reason was the fork, and I'll talk about that fork here in a moment, did not quite have enough length in the steer tube that I could build this height up with spacers. And so that's why I had to put this part on there. And that leads us right into talking about the fork, which I got lightly used secondhand and at an incredible bargain. It's a carbon fiber fork. It gives that vibration absorbing nature of carbon fiber, and it's quite light. But it gets harder and harder to find forks that have these mounting studs for this type of brake on them. I wanted to make sure, first of all, that it had the appropriate axle to crown distance so that it would duplicate the height I had when I was riding a suspension fork on this bike with a bit of sag, and it did that. Just didn't quite have the length. That's fine. C'est la vie. The brakes are the original Dura XT V brakes, and I did have in my parts kit a replacement cartridge, a set of replacement cartridges for the brake pads here, and so put some new pads on. I also swapped out the cable and housing. I had some universal brake cables that I went ahead and decided, hey, I've got these things and they're dedicated to the project now. So that was good. Wheels, I'll talk about the tires a bit later, but the wheels are 26-inch wheels. These are Mavic 217s. They were a classic in the day. It's a 32-spoke wheel, very sturdy. I did have a pair of ultralight race wheels that got sold somewhere along the way. I wish I still had them today, but that's the way these things go, is it not? Now our saddle, again for this type of bike and riding, I often or almost always don't wear a chamois, so I decided I'd put the padding in the saddle, in this case being gel, as opposed to in my shorts. Original seat post here, and if I come back to the frame, I really like talking about the beauty of the titanium frame. I think it may be the absolute best material for a bicycle frame, and it is known to be very light. These titanium frames tend to ride like a high-quality butted steel frame, in other words, that they're slightly forgiving or resilient might be a better word, lively even. Now this frame was built for performance and possibly also to minimize warranty issues, so it's as stiff from a torsional or stability concern as any aluminum or carbon fiber frame I've ever ridden, but it does have that beautiful, sometimes hard to describe nature of titanium. So I'm so pleased to be able to ride it. Now we got a chance to get to the tires, and one of the things when we have these 90s bikes is the tire clearance isn't certainly as ample as it is on some of the more modern bikes we have today. So about the max that I could get was 2.4 inches of clearance up front. So I'm running a Kenda small block 8, 2.35 inch, and that's a small knobby. It's got 8 rows of blocks there. So this is kind of a hybrid tire, in my opinion, or a crossover. It's not quite as fast or has as much as low rolling resistance as a semi-slick would, but it also has some good traction without being loud on the road. In the back, I've only got about a max of 2.2, maybe for a slick, and 2.1 inches here at the chainstays. So I went with a tire that I actually had in my parts kit. I don't know that they're made anymore, but this is a Hutchinson Scorpion. It's a cross-country race tire, 26 by 2.0 inches wide, and it's got enough aggressive knobbies so if I stand up in loose gravel or if I'm riding in mud that I'll have good traction, but it's not too pronounced in the center, so it's, again, not too loud on the road. Rolling resistance is acceptable, and that's kind of how I wanted to set this up, is, again, a bike that could go anywhere, and I'm not as concerned about eking out the last mile per hour or two of speed if that was going to sacrifice some of my trail performance, and so that's what I did. And ultimately, this this brings us to talking about the drivetrain, which is probably the big consideration here. If I begin with the cassette, the original cassette was an 11 by 28, and I wanted a broader gear range, and so this one is an 11 by 42, and I am using a Dior XT long cage derailleur. Now, the original derailleur that was on here was a Dior XT short cage. So I took that off and I had a new in the box in my parts kits, long cage, and I put that on. I needed to use a derailleur hanger extender, which I also had. And so I set that up. I had an 8-speed chain. Got all that on, and then when I came to the crankset, the original crankset was a 172.5 millimeter crank arm. I had SPD pedals on there, and it was a triple chainring crankset. So I found this, which is a square taper bottom bracket compatible model with a 104 millimeter bolt circle diameter, just a budget rig. And I was going to put a hollow bottom bracket on this, but then I thought, I've got a new cartridge bottom bracket in the box, so I went ahead and replaced the bottom bracket in here and was able to go with this. The interesting thing is the chainring, I think, in all of this, because I was doing some gear inch calculations, and when I had the 44 by 11, that was giving me a 100-inch gear, and I didn't really need a gear that big for, again, the style of riding that I'm doing. I wanted to get close, but didn't have to be too close. So I thought, maybe I'm going to get a 40 tooth chainring. That was what I was thinking, in order to have that higher gear. And then I also thought, I'm going to be on some trail, and this is a 42, but it's certainly not a 50 plus chainring like you have on some of the modern bikes. And I thought, maybe I'd need to use a 36. So I split the difference with a 38. And I put some math into this to make sure that was going to meet with my needs, and it did fairly well. But what you'll notice is I've got an oval chainring on there, and these are great. They're the first time in over 50 years of riding. This is the first time I've ever used an oval chainring, and I would say that they do give you a bit more feeling of power through the pedals to the rear tire in slow speed climbing or technical terrain. I'm not doing too much of that these days with this bike. But there's another unique factor. Just because of the biomechanics of how the legs work, these oval chain rings actually make it easier for you to stay on top of the gear or to get back up on top of the gear. And with only having 8 speeds, I thought, that's going to be great, because that's going to allow me to not feel like I have to shift as much, not have experienced as many dead spots in the pedal stroke perhaps. There are a lot of pundits or advocates for these oval chain rings, but I would highly recommend them. I think I'm going to use them on some future projects as well. A great invention for modern cyclists. Let's see, what have I left out in talking about this bike? I don't think too much. The total weight, 23.1 pounds for what I've got here, so it's very light. And I did forget to mention these alloy pedals that I put on. Again, a bargain brand here, but very lightweight, and I'm very pleased with them. They're working superbly. So that's the bike, and the reason why I wanted to share this was because many of us probably have a bike like this sitting around in the garage or basement, hopefully not gathering dust, but even if it is, you can do some things without spending a ton of money to make this bike serviceable. Now, if I've said I wanted to go out and buy a new bike, similarly equipped or even better. So let's say maybe that would be a bike that has 27.5-inch wheels. Probably not going to get a 29er at the price point I'm talking about here, but if I had 27.5-inch wheels and through axles and a hollow bottom bracket and disc brakes and a slightly wider gear range, well, okay, there's $1,000, but that bike is not going to have a titanium frame and probably a carbon fiber fork. So this is unique. The 26-inch bikes are also nimble and very maneuverable. They accelerate fast. They're easy to work around obstacles with. And even if you're not riding in terrain that necessitates that, they are fun. And so if you are inclined to take on a project like this, it doesn't require a ton of specialized knowledge or skills. A few tools, yes, and follow whatever directions are available, but you can put together something that's going to serve you well. And that's really my whole message here. Cycling is one of these great longevity-oriented or lifetime sports. You can do it in so many ways. You can compete, you can train, you can you ride for fun and for joy, and you can commute, and you can do so many things. But the bike serves us well as lifetime athletes. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. And thank you so much for joining me today.